The Toronto Raptors have been trying to perfect this Vision 6-9 puzzle for the last few years. They brought in veteran leadership, brought in 2 defensive centers to anchor the rim, drafted a knockdown shooter, but they have been trying to jam a square peg into a round hole pause for the last couple of seasons at point guard. Now, with the signing of Dennis Schroder, who has actually been lighting up the FIBA tournament, taking Germany to a perfect 5-0 run this summer, he might actually be the missing piece to the puzzle to unlock Vision 6-9. So what does he bring that the Raps have been kind of missing these last few years with Fred VanVleet at point guard? Well, first, the ability to elevate star teammates. All solid teams need point guards that can elevate the rest of the team, but specifically elevate the stars on the team. Think of how easy finishing plays was for Blake Griffin with CP3, for literally every player that has played with Steph Curry. There's a certain skill set and mindset you need to have as a point guard to know how and when to get easy buckets for teammates so that the stars don't have as much of a burden on their shoulders. One of the league's great point guard floor generals of this era is Kyle Lowry. And since Lowry left Toronto in 2021, Raps have been needing a true floor general that can elevate Pascal, elevate OG on offense. Give them easy buckets, just set them up to finish the play. And Lowry had an amazing 2-man game with Pascal. Back in 2019-20, after the championship season, after Kawhi left, the Raps had a great late game execution, mainly because they relied on Lowry and Pascal's 2-man game. Over the last 2 seasons, however, without Lowry, Fred, he's been a good point guard. He literally put the team on his back to start the 21-22 season last year, or the year before I mean. When Siakam was injured, he put up all-star level numbers. However, rather than a Lowry-esque floor general, he was more of a scorer, a shooter that could playmate in the pick and roll. He didn't have the ability to consistently get easy shots for Siakam, OG, Scottie. His main created assists were to the rolling screener. One huge missing piece in the offense was the vertical threat through lobs, which is kind of a failure for this roster because the roster is filled with super tall players. Lobs were a mess, and a lot of times, Precious, Koloko, Boucher, they would be in perfect position to finish a lob, but the pass was placed in a position where they had to catch the ball, come down, bring the ball down, and then go back up, which made their rolling threat so much less effective. You have to ask yourself, why was Precious and Boucher receiving so much blame for their so-called bad hands when Scottie, who's on the same exact team playing with the same exact players, was carving up defenses with lobs? It's the same players on the receiving end. And a lot of the limitations on offense was because of VanVleet's height, which prevented him from making certain passes, certain plays over defenders and double teams. He needed others to bail him out when doubled, taking them out of prime position to finish the play. They had to relocate so he can actually pass out to them. There were many quarters where VanVleet would spam pick and roll on every single possession because he just couldn't get his own separation. Imagine if Siakam could get 3 to 4 easy downhill layups a game. Easy peasy. He doesn't have to create all this on his own. Now, in comparison, Dennis Schroder has a history of playing effectively with big men in the pick and roll. He's a veteran that plays more as a floor general guard rather than a volume scoring guard. And very obvious and recent evidence of his competence in this role is the last Lakers playoff run where they reached the Western Conference Finals. The Lakers were elite, carving up defenses when he was the point guard on the floor next to AD and LeBron rather than D'Lo on the floor. Over a solid amount of evidence, 130 minutes in the playoffs, when AD and LeBron had Schroder as the point guard instead of D'Angelo Russell, they had a crazy plus 14 net rating, and they didn't even do something outlandish. The Lakers roster had a huge weakness, which was three-point shooting. Surprise, surprise, the Raptors had the same exact weakness in terms of roster construction, but the Lakers rotation wasn't beating teams with threes and outscoring them from the three-point line, but with destroying them from well-timed cuts, ball movement, attacking the rim. Schroder played surprisingly good defense on Steph Curry too, who's still, obviously, it's Steph Curry, he gave him the business, but there's only so much you can do against Steph. The Lakers also torched Defensive Player of the Year, Jaren Jackson, by making him make tough decisions and taking advantage at the rim against mismatches. The style of play the Lakers played in the playoffs should be what the Raptors should be trying to replicate and take a lot of hints from, because the Raptors have similar strengths and similar weaknesses to that team, and Schroder was a great floor general for that team in the playoffs. This lack of three-point shooting is being overblown by a lot of fans, and a system that actually takes advantage of the roster's strengths rather than having players just figure it out on their own will expose why Nick Nurse's reputation was way overhyped, especially in terms of creativity. Beyond just elevating his team though, Schroder, he spent the summer showing the world that he's much more versatile than he's been given credit for. Over the last couple of seasons, Raptors fans slowly started turning on Fred VanVleet, calling him a shot chucker, a ball hog. Despite being able to score, ask yourself, would you consider the plays on the screen that you're seeing on the screen right now as easy buckets or a so-called good possession? This is mainly due to his declining ISO scoring, especially in the closing minutes of games. Oh my god. End of games was just terrible for Fred. I would say this was again due to his limitations due to his height. He can't create the separation. He can't get the shot off that he thinks he can when the defense is locked in on him. It's very easy to stop Fred VanVleet. In the play-in, this was especially evident when he was dribbling the air out of the ball on multiple possessions. Granted, he scored 26 points, but what the hell is this? Look at the other wide open players like OG. This is why there are so many chemistry issues on the roster. Players that can get easier shots off simply due to a height and strength advantage were just standing around while VanVleet would call his own number and get a terrible shot off. Nick Nurse empowered this kind of play, and that's why I'm all for his firing and I'm all for letting the Sixers fans enjoy that experience of Nick Nurse. But going back to how Fred used the pick and roll, his main strength was three-point shooting. He literally took 619 threes compared to 519 field goal attempts inside the arc. And sure, he's a good three-point shooter, but he relies way too heavily on his three. He literally only took 12% of his shots at the rim. This last season, his game was exposed to show how ineffective he is when his threes are not hitting. He became one of the league's least efficient scorers, all because his three was not falling. He is not a good scorer anywhere else. A huge upgrade at the guard position the Raptors have with Schroder is how effective he is now at attacking the rim. This is primarily because he is one of the fastest players in the league. He had that R2 speed boost off the dribble on drives, and he can use his body to score much more effectively than just a prayer thrown over a huge size advantage that VanVleet used to do. A 6'3" guard versus a 6-foot guard might not sound like much of a difference, but there's a reason why Schroder doesn't shy away from the rim and defenders have to guard that drive. In the clip that you're seeing on the screen, ask yourself, how would this fast break with two defenders and 23 seconds left on the clock if this was SC Fred VanVleet? Because as you can see, Schroder's ability to easily finish at the rim and above and over and around defenders rather than pray for a whistle in the final seconds of a game, which, let's be honest, will rarely ever happen because refs are not trying to decide games. Schroder's ability cut this to a one-possession game for the Lakers. Notice how Schroder on ball is a quick decision maker, and he's not dribbling the air out of the ball for a huge chunk of the possession. It's just a couple of dribbles and attack the rim and get the defense in motion. And it's not like he's a bad three-point shooter. He shot 33% from three last season. Fred also shot just 34%, but he's more than capable of hitting open threes. Overall, the rim pressure, the ability to get into the paint and play with patience, this is all what's going to be way more useful and what's actually needed compared to what we had at guard last season. Another Schroder attribute that's been super underrated though is his defense as a guard. He's an underrated defender with a super high motor and a super high IQ. In the playoffs, his defense on Ja Morant and Steph Curry held Ja to 24 points per game, and Curry obviously dropped 26 points per game, but Schroder was still a pest. He's also been a good defender for his size, especially to guard opposing point guards. As a help defender, rotating to the rim if needed. Imagine if we had Schroder guarding Tyrese Maxey in the last playoffs rather than Fred VanVleet. even if he's not a prototype lockdown defender, he plays defense with IQ. His defense reminds me more of a Lowry or a Chris Paul than a Fred VanVleet, who was more hyper-aggressive, leading to these inflated steals numbers. Comparatively, Fred's defense was declining as the season went along, or the last couple of seasons at least. He was terrible on defense, especially in the do-or-die play-in game. Sure, he got a ton of steals, but the overall toll on his body with the minutes he was playing affected whether he could keep players in front of him, fighting over screens. The little things that made him a pest on defense in his younger years now seemed like they were heavily declining as the season went along. And I don't even want to mention again how he got destroyed by Tyrese Maxey in that 2022 playoffs against the Sixers. Fred was in the top 5 or so of steals per game over the last few seasons, but there's a strong suspicion, to me, this was just heavily influenced by the aggressive style of defense that the Raptors played under Nick Nurse, rather than his own individual defensive abilities. To back that up, Gary Trent Jr., OG, they were also top 10 for steals per game over the last couple seasons. So are they all elite defenders at forcing turnovers, or is it possible that the system has allowed their numbers to be inflated? Well, now, without Nick Nurse's system, without multiple high-level defenders alongside him, Fred's defensive reputation is going to be put to the test in Houston. And he's going to either cement himself as one of the best guard defenders in the league, or just another one of those system players. So overall, Schroder being a more versatile player due to his rim pressure abilities, his ability to elevate star teammates as a true floor general type of point guard, and being a sneaky high IQ defender allows him to kind of fill certain needs that the Raptors had, pretty much that they had since the departure of Lowry. And Schroder, he's got like a little bit of a troll streak to him, which I think is actually absolutely hilarious. So for all those reasons, and what he's shown in the FIBA games this summer, Dennis Schroder might be the final missing piece to take this Raptors core to that next level. So I'm excited to see what happens.